evening. You're watching ARIRANG News at 8. It's Friday, February 14th here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I am Yoo Ji-hye. But after a rather rocky ride, the much anticipated and delayed cross-border family reunions are to take place next week as planned. The agreement was reached at high-level inter-Korean talks that were held for the second time in just 3 days. Hwang Sung-hee reports.
In the second round of high-level talks on Friday, the two Koreas agreed to hold the reunions for families separated since the Korean War next week as planned, in an effort to improve inter-Korean relations. North Korea had earlier demanded the South postpone its joint military drills with the United States to sometime after the family reunions. But South Korea's chief delegate Kim Kyou-hyun said Pyongyang did not attach any preconditions this time around.
North Korea did not object to the fact that the joint military drills that began on February 24th will overlap with the family reunions.
Millions of Koreans were separated by the Korean War more than 6 decades ago, and there are some 70,000 South Korean family members waiting to see their loved ones one last time. Next week's reunion will be the first such event in over 3 years, as the North had canceled a planned round of family reunions last September, just days before the event. The South Korean official said that after hours of discussions, Pyongyang agreed that the humanitarian event could become a symbolic step forward in inter-Korean relations. The two Koreas also agreed to stop throwing insults at each other to increase trust. Ending cross-border slandering was part of North Korea's so-called important proposal made last month to the South. The two sides will hold an additional round of high-level talks in the future, although no specific date has been set. The South Korean chief delegate said that the government will thoroughly prepare for a successful reunion event next week. A 15-member South Korean delegation will depart for Mount Keungang on Saturday to fine-tune the details for the upcoming reunions. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
Well, North Korea appears to have accelerated excavation at its nuclear bomb testing site in the northeast of the country, but a test isn't believed to be imminent. Referring to its new satellite images, the U.S.-Korea Institute at Johns Hopkins University says North Korea likely started work last May on a new tunnel at its Punggye-ri site, where it conducted its 3 previous nuclear tests, the most recent in February 2013. The U.S. Institute estimates the pile of earth excavated from the tunnel has doubled over the last few weeks. A former State Department official and editor of 38 North, Joel Witt, said, while there is no evidence that points to Pyongyang's preparation for another nuclear test, if a decision were made tomorrow, it could conduct a blast probably by late March or April. And following up on his trip to Seoul, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry began a 2-day visit to Beijing on Friday, where a meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping took top billing. As our Park Ji-won reports, bettering bilateral relations and North Korea's nuclear program were high on the list of topics.
Upon arriving in China on Friday, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry sat down for talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Afterwards, Kerry told reporters that his meetings with President Xi was very constructive and positive, and added that both countries hope to make concrete progress in bilateral relations this year. Doing that, Kerry added, would require both Washington and Beijing to manage their differences effectively and to cooperate practically on issues whenever possible. After his meeting with President Xi, Kerry held separate talks with other high-ranking officials, including his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi. The Chinese foreign minister said China stands ready to work with the U.S. with the principles of non-confrontation, mutual respect, and cooperation at the heart of the relations. Kerry reportedly called on China to help bring North Korea to nuclear disarmament talks. He said China can do more to urge North Korea to comply with its international obligations. Encouraging Chinese leaders to pressure North Korea to end its nuclear program is one of Secretary of State Kerry's main goals in Beijing. Kerry arrived in China on early Friday from South Korea, where he met with South Korean President Park Geun-hye, reaffirming that Seoul and Washington are in agreement when it comes to the denuclearization of North Korea. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
Now, staggering may be a word to describe a figure released by government auditors on the country's public companies. The amount of debt owed by them was roughly $770 billion in 2012, which is equivalent to more than 60% of the country's GDP. ARIRANG's Hwang Sung-hee has more on the alarming tally.
Korea's public sector debt represented 64.5% of the nation's gross domestic product in 2012. The finance ministry said Friday that the total amount of debt owed by the central and provincial governments and non-financial state-run companies stood at over 820 trillion won, or roughly $770 billion as of the end of 2012. That is up more than $63 billion from the previous year. The ministry said the debt figures represent new government data that's based on the latest international guidelines set by the International Monetary Fund. The data excludes money borrowed by state-run financial companies like the Bank of Korea and the Korea Exim Bank. The ministry explained that including the debt of state-run financial companies could distort the final figures because their deposits are counted as debt. With the new data, the ministry aims to offer the public a clearer picture of the debt situation in the public sector and encourage public sector businesses to operate more transparently. The Korean government recently launched a drive to reform the nation's public organizations, urging them to reduce debt and streamline their business operations. The nation's public organizations have been facing mounting criticism for having lax management despite their growing debt. The IMF said that the new government data is a measure of the administration's will to make data collection practices more transparent and bring them in line with international standards. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
The government will implement a new system that would allow debt-ridden local governments to declare themselves bankrupt. In a status report to President Park Geun-hye on Friday, the Public Administration Ministry announced that once bankruptcy is declared, the central government or a higher level office will intervene to reform the local government's finances. It added that it will hold the heads of the local governments responsible for their poor fiscal management rather than putting the burden on the public. The plan comes in line with President Park's push to implement strong measures to control local government debt, which had ballooned to $4.7 billion as of 2012. And starting next week, Korea's 3 leading credit card companies that were responsible for the worst data leak in the country's history will have to close their doors for 3 months. Top executives of the firms in question will be punished as well. Our Kwon So-ah has the details.
3 months of not doing business. That's the punishment KB Gukmin Card, NH Nongyop Card, and Lotte Card will get for their involvement in the biggest personal data leak in Korean history. The Financial Supervisory Service said Friday a proposed suspension of business at the 3 companies will start Monday and continue to May 16th. The main focus of the suspension is on banning the companies from taking on new customers. Providing credit card loans and cash advances to new contractors will also be forbidden. Existing customers, however, won't feel the effects of the ban as they will be provided with financial services as usual. The suspension will also exclude operations related to the public interest, such as the issuance of student identification cards. In the end, the suspension is expected to cost the 3 companies 100,000 clients a month and a combined 50 billion won or $47 million during the 3-month period. An official at the Financial Services Commission referred to it as the harshest penalty the firms could have received, not only because of the losses incurred, but because 3 months is the longest suspension allowed by law. The suspension is expected to be finalized by the FSC at a meeting on Sunday, and in the coming month, the FSC will also consider recommendations for dismissals of CEOs and executives deemed responsible for the leak. In related news, a suspension of telemarketing operations at financial and insurance companies put in place as a preventative measure at the end of last month was lifted on Friday, thanks to indemnity reports submitted by company executives. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
The chairman of one of Korea's largest conglomerates, CJ Group, Lee Jae-hyun, was sentenced to 4 years in prison on Friday for tax evasion and embezzlement. On top of the 4-year prison term, the Seoul Central District Court also ordered Lee, the country's 10th richest man, to pay a fine of about $24 million. He was found guilty of misappropriating roughly $156 million in company assets at offshore ghost companies and dodging taxes. The sentence comes as President Park Geun-hye has been pressing officials to clamp down on corporate malpractice to collect funds from tax evaders for welfare projects. He has been hospitalized at a Seoul hospital since last year, citing poor health.
Touch base with journalists, experts, and analysts who are taking the pulse of Asia's heartbeat.
South Korea's defense minister.
In a lively half hour, join ARIRANG's Yoo Ji-hye for the day's top stories, current affairs, business, technology trends, plus global weather forecasts and more. ARIRANG News. Every weeknight, live on ARIRANG TV.
Korean and Chinese nationals residing in Australia have agreed to put up a number of monuments across the nation that honor victims forced into sexual slavery by Japan during World War II. Now, public leaders from each community that is, decided after a meeting this week to work together to urge Japan to admit its past wrongdoings and make amends. No timetable was given for when and where the monuments might go up, yet the two sides came up with a list of 10 objectives. They include Japan apologizing for the repeated visits by high-ranking officials to the controversial Yasukuni War Shrine and urging the United States to block Tokyo's move toward rearmament. The push to better promote the Korean name for the body of water that separates Korea and Japan is spreading in the U.S. Now, following up on the success seen in the state of Virginia, New York is considering similar legislation. And one of the people behind this grassroots movement in Washington sat down with our Kim Kyou-hyun to explain how it all began.
54-year-old Peter Kim witnessed a moment that will go down in the history of Korean Americans. It all started 2 years ago with a conversation he had with his son, who was in 5th grade at the time.
I asked my son, Chris, do you know the sea between Korea and Japan? Yes, Daddy. What's the name of it? Sea of Japan. So I really got upset. And I told him that it's not true. It's EC, and you call it Tongye. And he said, Daddy, it's in the textbook. That's how I learned in schools.
That's when Peter decided to take action. He went on to form a group which later spearheaded a grassroots movement of Korean Americans in the D.C. metro area.
I mean, there were a lot of people coming from Washington area, driving 2 hours to Richmond. They had to get up 3 o'clock in the morning. It's a cold weather here. Sometimes it was snowing, but still, senior citizen people, they just, wanted to go and show up at the General Assembly and pressure the Democratic, the delegates and senators to vote for EC bill.
However, the long and arduous journey was far from easy.
The most difficult one was the House Education Subcommittee, 9 members. Governor McAuliffe's staff actually went to them to stop the bill, and they actually did, and it was a 4-4 tie. They had to vote again and barely passed in 5-4.
Although last week's victory in Virginia means the same law will be applied to 7 other states in the southeastern U.S., Peter Kim says his hopes do not stop there.
So the journey in Virginia has come to an end, but do you think this journey should stop or continue elsewhere?
I think it should continue. I did my part, and other Korean Americans should step up and stick together and continue this movement until 2017, where IHO meets, and hopefully IHO agrees on both names, EC and Sea of Japan.
Kim Kyou-hyun, ARIRANG News, Washington.
And today, February 14th, is Valentine's Day, where people around the world celebrate love. But here in Korea, the day means much more, as it also holds great historical significance. 104 years ago today, one of Korea's most respected independence fighters was sentenced to death. Connie Kim reports.
February 14th may be an important day to remember for couples to exchange chocolates and cards, but a growing number of Koreans are calling for it to also be remembered as the day independence fighter An Jung-geun was sentenced to death during Japan's colonization of Korea. An was executed for assassinating Hirobumi Ito, a four-time prime minister of Japan and the former resident general of Korea in the Chinese city of Harbin in October 1909. Efforts to commemorate An's death are being made offline and online. The Gyeonggi-do Provincial Office of Education has placed poster of An's famous left handprint in newspapers, informing people of the historical significance of February 14th. The image shows An's handprint with a half-cut ring finger. An cut his finger off to show his determination to make Korea an independent country. Koreans have also been taking to Facebook and Twitter to post comments raising awareness of the day. An is a highly respected figure not only in Korea but also in China. A memorial hall honoring An opened in January in Harbin, the city where An shot down Ito. Hailed as a hero in Korea and China, An is less well remembered in Japan. Responding to news of the memorial hall, Japanese Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga called An a terrorist and expressed deep regret about Beijing's decision to approve the opening of the memorial hall. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
And we are right in the heart of winter here in Korea, which means it's prime time for flu season. The Korea Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said the number of new flu patients in the nation has reached a new peak for the season. Out of every 1,000 people that went to hospitals this week, 54 were suspected of having a strain of the influenza virus. That's almost 5 times higher than the level at which a flu warning is issued. However, the center adds this flu season has so far been mild compared to previous years. And taking it now to Indonesia, a volcano in Java Island erupted on Thursday, forcing tens of thousands of people out of their homes. Officials issued an evacuation alert for 200,000 people living within a 10-kilometer radius around Mount Kellet. Local media outlets are reporting that 2 people have died beneath collapsed houses, and 4 airports in the area have been temporarily closed due to low visibility. Mount Kellet had been rumbling for weeks and last erupted in 1990, killing dozens of people. This Valentine's Day marks the 8th day of the 2014 Winter Games, and the sweetest treat an athlete in Sochi can get is, of course, a well-earned gold medal. Now, for more on the headlines from Sochi, we now go over to our Olympics correspondent, Song Ji-san. So, Ji-san, where are we going to start this evening?
Well, Ji-hye, after garnering the 2nd medal from the short track last night, it's been a quiet day for the Korean team, but the domestic and foreign press had a field day following around Korea's figure queen, Kim Kyou-hyun. Less than 24 hours after arriving in Sochi, Kim got right to work, training at the practice venue by the Iceberg Skating Palace. She said adapting to these ice conditions in the main rink would be the most important thing, and added that she skated on similar types of ice in the past. After a few hours of warming up, Kim made herself right at home, jumping the triples. The latest short program is scheduled for next Wednesday, and official practice sessions at the event venue start Sunday. And flawless execution of the quadruple jump is a must if you want to finish at the lead of the pack in men's figure skating these days, along with the triple combination and, of course, smooth steps and spins. The male skater who did all of that the best last night is the 19-year-old Japanese skater Yujiro Hanyu, who is coached by Brian Orser, the same man that coached Kim Kyou-hyun when she won her gold medal in Vancouver. Hanyu carried out all these elements in style to earn over 101 points for the short program. Now that's the first three-digit result from the men's short program ever. And it looks like Canadian world champion Patrick Chan will have to pull it off in the long skating tonight, trailing Hanyu by just 4 points. In the meantime, Russia's figure skating star Yevgeny Pluchenko withdrew from the short program and retired from Olympic competitions and competitive figure skating altogether. The four-time Olympian led his nation to victory in the team event earlier this week, but couldn't recover from his injury and called it quits for the singles event. And like the veteran Pluchenko, athletes often shoot for as many medal events as possible, and sometimes even enter events they don't fully expect to win. Although training herself as a short distance sprinter, Yi Sang-hwa also entered the 1,000 meters. Now she's not vying for a podium finish, but was still one of the top 12 fastest speed skaters for this event. China's Zhang Hong clocked in at a minute 14.02 seconds to win the gold. And the Dutch team continued its dominance in this event, taking the home silver and bronze. And those were multi-medalist Irene Wurst, who won the 3,000 meters on Sunday, and Margot Boer, who already earned a bronze on 500 meters. It's not an easy task winning a gold medal in the Olympics, especially if you're aiming to win one in a sport that's relatively new to your country. And a number of Korean athletes fall in that category, but the lack of proper training facilities hasn't stopped them from becoming Olympians. Kim Kyou-hyun tells us this story.
Skeleton racer Yoon Sung-bin only hopped on a sled a year ago, but before you know it, Yoon became the first Korean to qualify for the Olympics in the sport. For now, his goal is to place in the top 15, but going forward, he has even bigger dreams.
I'm looking at the long term for the Olympics, and to gain experience, I will try to show you my progress since the summer.
Korea's ski jump team failed to qualify for the final on the normal hill ski jump this week. But the athletes have put their disappointment aside and are now focused on qualifying for the large hill ski jump competition.
Up to 30th place gets to compete in the final, and our goal is to do just that. But personally, I would like to place in the top 10.
Curling is another sport that did not get much love before. But the other day, Team Korea's ladies team shocked everyone by putting up a great fight against the #1 seed, Sweden. Their record stands at 2 wins and 2 losses in Sochi, and they are scheduled to face China for the 5th round. The team needs 6 wins out of 9 preliminary round matches to win a ticket to the semifinals. Kim Kyou-hyun, ARIRANG News.
Well, in fact, the Korean women's curling team is now going through its round-robin sessions against China, and Germany is going strong in one of the slaying events, that being the luge. Germany has garnered the most gold medals so far, with 4 of them coming from the luge. Taking a closer look at the medal count as we wrap up the first week of Sochi 2014, you now need about a dozen medals to crack the top 5. After Germany on top, the runners-up follow with 4 gold medals each, with Canada, Norway, the Netherlands, and the US running neck and neck from 2nd to 5th. Team Korea stays in 13th place with a speed skating gold and a short track bronze from last night. And keep your eyes on the games to see if those medal rankings change overnight. On the event scheduled for day 8 of the Olympics, find out who the new champion in men's figure skating is. The free skating starts at midnight Korea time. And for some more extreme action, female skaters show off their tricks on a huge scale in freestyle skiing aerial. See just how these big jumps are with your own eyes. We'll bring you live results in our next newscast at 10 p.m. Korea time. And hope you all athletes and sports fans have a happy Valentine's Day.
While the east coast regions of Korea are trying to dig their way out after days of snow, over in the U.S., it's the northeast that's battling a fresh blast. For more, let's go over to our Kim Kyou-hyun at the Weather Center. Now, Pyongyang, the term snowmageddon is being used to describe the situation in the U.S. Now, tell us more.
That's right, Tia. It has been a destructive snowstorm over in the northeastern, that is, United States. At least 30 centimeters of snow fell overnight, leading the federal government to shut down for the third time this winter, and at least 18 casualties have been reported so far. Back here in the nation, we are at the edge of a high-pressure system from the East Sea, which is why we're seeing cloudy skies in the East Coast regions. Well, today may be marked as Valentine's Day for some of you, but here in Korea, it's also observed as 정월 대보름, which indicates the first full moon of the year according to the lunar calendar. Now, you should be able to check out a bright full moon at around 12:25 a.m. in most parts of the country. Other than that, this weekend looks to be a sunny one nationwide. However, please keep in mind that another round of snow showers awaits us next Monday, starting in Gangwon-do province. Moving on to tomorrow's readings, Seoul reaches 8 degrees while Gwangju and Busan hit 10. Moving on to other regions, Daejeon and Jeju peak at 7 and 9 degrees respectively. Meanwhile, Mount Kumgang tops out at -3. Well, that's all I have for you this hour, and back to you, Ji-hye.
Thanks, Pyongyang. And that's our news for this hour. I'm Yoo Ji-hye in Seoul. Thanks for watching.